Good morning. So, today I wanted to speak to you about my testimony. Now, I was born in 1988. I'm 36 years old. My mother suffered challenges with addiction, mental health, and wasn't in a great place to be able to care for me. So, I went into foster care for a little while. Before this time, I lived with my nan up in Bournemouth. My nan was a witch who used to practice hoodoo. So I was really concerned before I came to Christ and realised that nothing could harm me because I'm a child of God, that she may have placed some curses on me. My nan really didn't get on with my mum, so I wasn't really wanted, to be honest. I came to live with my grandparents after being in the foster care. I was about to go up for adoption. However, at the age of 5, I came to live with my grandparents. And I had an amazing life with my grandparents. We would go on holiday. My granddad would take me to the park for hours, blackberry picking and conker collecting, sing all these funny songs and jokes. And he was such a loving man, and I really do miss him. My nan also, always done her best to look after me and care for me. Unfortunately, because of my early experiences in life, I suffered a lot of trauma and abuse whilst I was with my mother. There was social services reports that stated she left me on a beach with strangers. She'd placed me in a taxi after a court case. I remember my granddad telling me that I arrived at his house cold, hungry, and there was many other things that happened to me that should have never have happened. I was abused in every single way as a child. So I basically grew up in the care system because after my nan and granddad took me in, it was around the age of 13 when all these experiences started to cause me to really kind of rebel. And my nan and granddad just couldn't take the rebellious teenager that I was. So they decided to put me in foster care. Foster care really didn't work out, so then I had to go up for into a children's home. And that was quite challenging because I suffered a lot of racism when I was younger. So when I was at school, I was the only black child in the school, and that was really difficult because a lot of the children were really mean and quite nasty and would often torment me and be very racist to me. I then went into the children's home, and again I was the only black child, so again I suffered a lot of racism. I think with that, I was a very geeky child. I was very shy, I was very timid, I was scared of my own shadow, to be honest. And what didn't help as well is that I realised at a very young age that I had certain gifts. I would often see things and hear things in the spiritual realm, which was really, really scary. And I didn't know at the time how to manage that. So then, after my children's home, I went to live in London for a while and got involved in a lot of crime. Then I had my first child at 19, and that was a really horrific time for me. I was 3 months pregnant when my child's father went to prison. I then entered into a relationship with another woman, and that really didn't work out well. I think I was looking for love in all the wrong places. I was so desperate because I'd never experienced love as a child. I had the love from my nan and granddad, but without the love from a mother and father, because I'd never met my father. Up until this point today, I still don't know who he is. And that's something that used to really hurt me and caused me a lot of psychological trauma until I met God, who, is my father, and I love him. And now it doesn't hurt that I don't know my biological birth father, because I have the most amazing, wonderful father that I could possibly ever want and need. So I have the most amazing father that I could ever possibly want or need. And but looking back then, I was very lost. I didn't know my identity. I remember when my granddad found me, and I was scrubbing my skin, and he asked me what I was doing, and I said I was trying to make myself white because I felt that if I was white, people would love me. And I remember the tears in my granddad's eyes as he tried to explain to me that I was beautiful the way I was. So my identity was something that really caused me a lot of challenges from a very young age, and that was something that I needed God to heal in me. Throughout my life, I've been severely abused, which has caused a lot of trauma, and it's, I've had a lot of therapy. I've had a lot of therapy. I've had trauma therapy, DBT, all these other types of counselling, and I can honestly say that the only thing that has helped is experiencing the love of God and knowing who I am as a child of God. Because I go to Forge, which is a disciple college, and one of the first topics we learned was identity. That was so profound for me because throughout my life I'd really struggled to form an identity because of the abuse and because of the racism. I didn't know who I was. I had many different versions of me, but I didn't know my true authentic self. So doing the topic of identity really gave me an opportunity to see who God had made me to be. And I feel like some people, they don't need therapy, they need God. I was, you'll hear in another story of mine when I share my testimony and how I came to be a Christian. But you'll hear that I was looking for a lot of answers, and only God had them answers. Only God was able to explain certain things to me, no one else. So I have suffered with a lot of domestic violence throughout my life as well, and unfortunately that has had an impact upon my children. I had my children removed due to domestic violence, mental health, and substance misuse. I wasn't ready to be a mum, and many of you say, why have children if you weren't ready? And that is honestly something that I think of every single day. There's not a day that goes by that I don't regret the choices and the decisions that I made. I love my children, they are my world, but I wish I would have waited to the point where I am in my life now before I went and had children, because I can't take back what's happened. I can move forwards and make a productive life for me and my children, which is what I'm doing now, but unfortunately that doesn't take away the pain that my children have had to suffer, and I take that on board and I have full insight into that. I now have a really great relationship with all of my children apart from one, and I'm really grateful to God for restoring my relationship with my children. I'm still currently going through a court case with one of them, which is very stressful and emotional, especially because, unlike my other children, I didn't make the same mistake with my younger child as I did with my older children, because I was in a completely different place and I was ready to be a mum. Unfortunately, I have a big past, and unfortunately some people don't want to let go of that past, and they don't want to acknowledge that I've made significant progress. And that's really hard for me to take on board sometimes, because I'm told that by God that I'm a new creation and that old things have passed away. However, when the government don't look at you as being a new creation, it can really cause a lot of psychological damage when people are still trying to portray you as the old version of yourself. But I know that God will make a way, and I know that I'm a child of God, and I know that when I keep my eyes on God, it doesn't matter what the world says. What matters is what God says, and I am who God says I am. That's something that I have to remind myself on a daily basis. So I basically went to live in Bradford, up north, after one of my relationships turned pretty horrific. There was a lot of domestic violence, and by this point I had lost my other children. I went to go and move down south because I realised that I needed a fresh new life. And at the time, I didn't actually know that I was going to move from Bradford to where I am now. At the time, I remember getting onto the coach early hours of the morning. I had a coach ticket to go back up Bradford, and God just said to me, you need to make changes in your life. And at that time I wasn't really a practicing Christian, so I was very worried, and I was very quite skeptical about what I'd heard God say to me. I'd always known of God throughout my life, but I wasn't an active practicing Christian at the time. Anyway, I rang up Women's Aid, and they said that they had a placement in a refuge. So I went to go in that place, and I remember arriving at the refuge a broken mess. I was lost, I was broken, and I'd lost everything. My children, my sanity, my dignity, my self-respect. I had very little clothing, I had literally nothing. So that was about 6 years ago, and in that time I've really worked hard to build a better version of myself, not just for myself but for my children as well. I have now been in my church for just over a year, and I'm really grateful that they've welcomed me and that they understand me. My church is very diverse, so there's a lot of different ethnic backgrounds, which is something that I really like, and it's very supportive. We have a lot of weekly activities, and I really enjoy all the church activities, and it was the first place that I really was able to encounter God. Family now is my church family. I still have my nan, who I adore and I love more than anything, but a lot of my family now is from my church, and they've stood by me through thick and thin. When I encountered God, I will speak about my calling a little bit later on in a different video, but when I experienced the love of God, there was nothing like it, and God has really done a work in me and walked through storms and trials of my life with me. At first, slow process when you come to God. For anyone that's a Christian will know that the sanctification process, the actual renewing of your mind, especially if you've lived a life of brokenness and addiction and mental health and physical health challenges, you'll understand that it's a really slow process. God will take it one step at a time. And when God heals you in layers. So there will be, one layer that comes off, and then another thing pops up that you need to deal with and work with God's help to be healed from. And then, so it's a continuous journey. You never stop growing in the Lord. And I've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia, osteoarthritis, diabetes. They've just diagnosed me that after having a lumbar puncture in December. I suffer with mental health diagnosis of anxiety, depression, PTSD, and emotional unstable personality disorder. So you'll notice in my videos that sometimes I do stutter and sometimes I do get a bit anxious. That's because I'm still working through these health challenges. but I really felt that God was asking me to come on and speak about how, because lots of people say to me, oh, how do you manage with all these health challenges? It must be really hard. And to be honest, it really was hard, especially in the beginning, because I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, and I was told that the reason why I had fibromyalgia was due to the trauma that I'd experienced from my past. So it was like living a death sentence for a crime that I didn't commit. And I remember how soul destroying it was when I couldn't do certain things. It was really weird because 2 years ago, I broke my foot and I was in a wheelchair. Then I was diagnosed with diabetes. Then it was the fibromyalgia that I was diagnosed with. And now I've just recently, and the osteoarthritis, and now I've just recently been diagnosed after having a lumbar puncture with IIH, which is intracranial hypertension. So I went through so many different feelings of anxiety, fear of death, and it was really challenging because I was scared, and I noticed that I couldn't do things that I used to be able to do and took for granted. I feel like I'm a much stronger person now because of everything I've experienced. Sometimes your calling will be what you thought would break you, because God turns everything around for good. So what the devil meant to harm you, God will turn around into making you, and then you can go out and speak to other people because you can relate to them. It's like training. You've been through the fire and now you're helping other people come through the fire. And this is why I like to share my story in these videos, because yes, at first I was a bit, when God said I want you to, start a YouTube channel and start talking to people about everything I've led you through, I was a bit like, oh, okay, so now I'm going to get onto, YouTube and speak to the whole entire world, people that are going to judge me and don't know me. And I was a bit worried about the backlash. But you know what? Sometimes you have to step out of the boat and have faith. If God asks you to do something, it's about being obedient. No matter what the world says, it's about being obedient to God and saying, okay, God, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you've told me to do, and this is what I'm going to do. Obedience to God is so important. So, yeah, it's been a real challenging few years. It's been a challenging 36 years, actually. But one thing I do know is that there's nothing God can't get you through. There's nothing God won't help you to get through. But the challenge is to keep your eyes on God, because it's only when you keep your eyes on God that you will be given the grace and the strength, because it's not in my strength. I couldn't have done any of this in my strength. I need you to know that. I could only do what God gave me the power to do. And many people, they hear my story and they hear what I've been through, and they just say to me, how have you come through everything you've been through? Because some people would have thought I'd have been dead or in jail by now, or, taking drugs. And despite the many challenges that I've had, I do know that when I gave my life to Jesus, I'm not saying challenges didn't come, because they did, but I had the strength and the wisdom to stand on the promises that God has blessed me with. I had the love and the strength and the grace to fight through another day. Because for anyone that suffers with mental and physical health challenges, you'll know that every day is a battle. And sometimes I would be so ill that I couldn't even get out of bed. And I'd sit there and I'd cry and I'd say, why me? And God would say, Charlene, I love you. You are a child of God, and I'm getting you through this step by step. And I look back and I see that the times when I couldn't carry myself, God carried me through. Just like the poem, The Footprints in the Sand. God carried me through. I am living proof that when you turn your life to Jesus, you are a new creation. My past doesn't define me. I am a child of God, and I am so grateful that God saved me from despair, brokenness, darkness, and transformed me and delivered me into the kingdom of light. And this is why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I truly I know some people get annoyed because I just never stop talking about Jesus. Once you allow Jesus into your heart and you start building your life upon Jesus, it will just take over. Jesus will just take over. And I know sometimes that can be quite annoying to unbelievers, because they don't have the personal revelation of what Jesus can do for them. But my prayer is that people's eyes will be opened. People will understand why Jesus come, and will understand that we live in a spiritual world and we have to keep our eyes upon the Lord. I'm now a manager for a phone line company called Match Mothers, which I really enjoy. It was a really painful experience of losing my children, and God is so good that He turned that around, and now I'm able to help other people. And I'm also in my second year of Forge, which is the Disciple College. I basically have just been married, and I'm just so proud that I'm not addicted to any drugs. I don't go out partying anymore. I am a new creation. During the first year of my Forge Disciple course, we looked at identity. Now, we were asked by our pastor to look at the biblical meaning of our name. And the biblical meaning of my name, Charlene, means free woman, free spirit, free thinker. And who the Son sets free is free indeed. My birthday is the 4th of July, which is American Independence Day, and it's about freedom and liberation. Now, all my life, I've never felt free. The moment I met God, I realised that I was free. I realised that God had opened up the cage. All I needed to do was to fly out of that cage. And that's what I'm doing. And I'm not looking back to yesterday, because every day God gives me the grace and the strength to sustain me. I am living proof of the amazing transformation that God can do in and through your life if you just open your heart and your mind to God. So I just wanted to come on and just share a quick testimony and a little bit about my story. There's so much more to it, but I think I've said enough for now. So thank you for coming on and watching this video. I pray you have a blessed day, and thank you for being a part of this story.